Hey everybody, it's Kirsty here. Finally going to be doing the video on Liberty German and Abigail Williams. They were murdered on the 13th of February, I should say, this year in Delphi, Indiana. Here we have the last picture ever taken of Abigail by Libby. And this was uploaded to Snapchat at 2:07 p.m. on that day. So we have a very defined time frame to work with. And yeah, I want to show you what the chart looks like for that time, what Abigail's chart looks like for that time, and what Libby's chart looks like as well. And then also a little bit of mapping and some possible areas of interest where we should be looking to find this bridge guy that nobody seems to know who it is. Okay, so the first chart I want to have a look at is the event chart. So this is a horoscope erected for 2:07 p.m. in Delphi, Indiana on the 13th of February this year for that photo that you saw prior. So it's called an event chart. It's read as an event chart and similarly to a horary chart, and also a 911 or a 000 or last seen chart. But this one is especially good because it is taken from one of the victims and has both victims in it and is documented on a photograph and uploaded to Snapchat. So there's a few things that we do know, and that is that both girls were dropped off at about 1 o'clock that afternoon to just go for a hike and take some photos. And by 2:07 they'd taken that picture that we saw previously. And then I pretty much think probably by 3 o'clock at least, both girls were in dire straits or maybe even deceased by that point. So what does this chart show us? First of all, the thing that you look for in a criminal situation, in a murder, in an event chart like this is the ascendant or the first house. Now, the first house rules the victim, or in this case, victims. And the co-ruler of the victims is the moon, and that is always the case when the first house represents a person. The co-ruler is the moon as well. Just so happens to be that the co-ruler is also the ruler of the ascendant. So the moon is really important here, and that is at 29 degrees of Virgo. 29 degrees is a critical point, but I will discuss that a little bit later on. Okay, so 5 degrees Cancer is the ascendant, so that's the girls. Straight opposite the ascendant is the descendant, or the 7th house. Now, if the first house is the girls, or the person in question, excuse me, got hiccups, excuse me, then it stands to reason that the very opposite house, or that very opposite axis point, the 7th house, represents the suspect or the killer. So we have the victim here and then the suspect here. So the suspect is in Capricorn, and that is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is in the 6th house here at 25 degrees of Sagittarius. So Saturn is an indication of an older person. we can see here that the descendant is also in the decan of Saturn as well. So that's implying that we're looking at somebody that is over the age of 29, over 30. They've had their Saturn return. Now, Saturn is the apex point of a T-square to the moon, which, as I said before, is the co-ruler. So there's a connection here. The moon, which is the ruler of the girls, and Saturn, which is the ruler of the suspect, are squaring each other. So there is a connection between the girls and him. So it's a very viable chart, and it shows that he was there, most probably there at 2:07 when the photo was taken, and watching. Okay. Chiron up here is opposing the moon, and that's forming a T-square to Saturn. So opposite that, it would form a square, and that would be at between 20 and, well, really between 20 and 29 degrees of Gemini. So that is a point of interest, and I'm going to actually mark that one up here. So you see that would form, that's a square, and a square to there, and then this square here. See, that forms the grand square. So this point here in Gemini finishes off that grand square. So it's important that we remember that for afterwards. Okay, now to try and get rid of that. Okay. So what's in the 7th house is also important to show us about the suspect. And Pluto, which is the ruler of all things taboo, hidden, dark, transformational, in event astrology and horary astrology, and not natal astrology, this is different. In this type of astrology, it represents something malefic happening, something bad happening. And Pluto's a malefic planet. And Pluto just happens to be also the apex of a T-square between Uranus in Aries and Jupiter. So, opposite Pluto at 18 Capricorn. So between sort of 18 and 20-ish, there's not much room for error here. There's also another point that we're looking at that's interesting that will finish off the Pluto grand square. Okay, so opposite Pluto. To me, that's pointing to the direction of the killer. So we have 2 points pointing there and pointing there. But then also we need to take into account that Saturn is in this position and Pluto is in this position. So when we get to the mapping, we'll take into account all those points there when looking for the suspect. Okay. Okay, so here we have Abby's chart. Her natal chart is on the inside here. And then the Snapchat pick time is the planets on the outside. Now have a look here. Abby's ascendant is not only in the decan of Pluto, it's at 18 degrees Cancer. So as you'll recall, on this Snapchat chart, 18 degrees of Pluto, remember as I said, opposite that point at 18 degrees of Cancer was going to be something interesting. So there again is that point, 18 of Cancer. which makes Pluto exactly on Abby's descendant, on 18 of Capricorn. So that means she was in the face of this person at that time, even to the point of saying, I would say that she was facing in his direction at that time. Okay, what else in Abby's chart do we have? The moon at 29 degrees of Virgo is actually conjunct Abby's IC, and that is the end of the matter. So her being the victim was the end of the matter. The end result was death, sadly, but that shows by her ruler being conjunct that fourth house. The fourth house is known as the womb and the tomb. Okay, there's quite a few things that show us actually what's going on here. Transiting Mercury is conjunct Neptune. Neptune is responsible for photographs and things like that. And Mercury is communication and Snapchat, basically. So this area shows us Snapchat. And it also shows me that this guy, even though this is a different chart still, he's not thinking straight at all. But we'll get back to that. Okay. And look at that. Abby's moon is at 22 degrees of Aries, conjunct Uranus. So her moon was triggered off by Uranus. Her descendant was hit by Pluto. The point of interest in Gemini is in her 12th house, and where her body was found is actually conjunct her Mercury as well. So there's lots of points of interest in Abby's chart, and so much so that it makes me believe that she was actually more the person of interest than Libby with this person or persons that's done this awful thing. Okay, now Libby's chart. Okay, we see Libby has 25 degrees Virgo rising, so the moon is conjunct her ascendant, again on an angle, so that's showing us her being the victim of this crime, and her moon is in the first house as well. Look at that. Okay, now Saturn in Sagittarius at 25 is conjunct Libby's fourth house, which is the end of the matter, and Saturn is death itself, so it was inevitable that that was going to happen. But that shows me also that possibly Libby was actually, maybe he tried to kill Libby first. I'm not sure whether he succeeded straight away, because I think she's a very strong girl and she would have fought. She would have fought like anything, actually. The sun that day was conjunct her Uranus, so she would have had a lot of flight and fight going on. She would have had a lot of fight in her. But overall, her chart, well, her Saturn innately is opposing transiting Saturn, so that's showing us on the MC. So yeah, she's the world. Excuse me. The world knows about this death. Saturn, the 10th house is the world and other people. You know, showing other people things, the public. But in general, this chart doesn't really show that Libby was the main person of interest more than Abby. Okay, so now to the map. So this is the bridge here that the photo was taken on. Okay. This photo was taken on these train tracks, this bridge here. And that bridge is right along here, the High Bridge in Delphi, Indiana, in Deer Creek here, runs through. So I've plotted all the lines on here from the Snapchat chart and a couple of other points as well. 5 degrees Cancer is that ascendant line, and that goes straight over the river there. And I believe that shows us that the girls actually went from the bridge across this way. They were found here. There's speculation as to whether they actually were taken around here. But no, I believe this 5-degree Cancer line here shows us that they went from the bridge, down the hill, across the water, and over to here. So this 20 degrees Gemini is where they were found roughly, and that was pretty pertinent in Abby's chart, as you'll just remember. Okay, 18 degrees of Cancer. If you just take your mind back a little bit, you'll remember that I said that that's a really important point. It's the opposite point of Pluto, and it, I believe, is showing us one of the directions that the suspect could be in. So I'm going to zoom in here. Okay, there's a few houses of interest really close by. We've got this one here, which just got covered up. I apologise. Take that away. This house here, I'm not sure which house this is, but that's exactly where that Pluto opposition leads, right there. 29-degree Virgo moon, which is the ruler of the chart itself, is here. So this house here is of interest to me. I will note that 18 degrees Cancer, if you go straight out all the way, it takes you to Kokomo, Indiana. And those of you that have followed the case probably know a suspect that, a believed suspect that lives in Kokomo. I won't mention who he is, but that line points directly to his house. Okay, where Libby's moon is in her chart points to this house. It's pretty insane. Every surrounding house, there's a important point in the chart that's pointing there. Okay, now I'm going to go out even further. Now this small circle here was 1.9 kilometres, it's Australian measurements. 1.9, which is very, very close to 18 degrees something of Capricorn, and the reoccurring 18. It's 1.88 kilometers, in fact. So there's that number. But the further we go out, if I take it to 18.88 kilometers, that's this big circle here. I believe that the perpetrator is within this area here. Now, there's a few points where it stops, and I'm going to go over there if I can. Okay. So what you have to do when you look at these maps is you need to start where the victims were and work your way out, basically. So these points here, Pluto, Saturn, the descendant, this area shows me that there's a wedge of, between here. Look at this wedge. I think it's highly likely he's in here. I think it's highly likely that he came from this direction. I think he came from East Main Street and down there. I don't know if you can do that. I'm not American. I do not know the roads. But he's come down there somewhere and or turned up here and come down this way and gone down the trail there. So he's come from up here, but I think he's come from actually over here. And there's a couple of points. You want to start looking at where the first lot of houses are, basically. And that is this first area here across Hoosier Heartland Highway, Riley Road, Crest Drive, this area near Deer Creek. Then we have East Main Street, as I said, and Cottage Street. This area is all quite interesting. And then something that I do believe from profiling the killer is that he attends church. And this point here came up quite clearly, and it happens to have that church in there. I'd be very interested to know if somebody volunteers or works at this church or has spent time at this church that may know this guy. And then there's these other streets here, West Franklin, East Franklin, and Monroe. So this whole area in here, Stony Creek Road, is interesting, and I think important to note that it's very likely that the person of interest is residing in this actual area. And quite often I've seen with these maps that it can be about 5 degrees either side of particular areas. So you might find we should really give it a bit of space up here and down here. So include West Main Street there. Okay. So I just want to have a look at this Snapchat chart again. Now, just quickly, I want to show you what it shows me about the perpetrator. Being in Capricorn shows me that initially it shows me that he's got something wrong with his bones. It can also show us with this Saturn being the ruler and in the 6th house here and in the decan of the Sun here and the decan of Saturn here, that this man has something wrong with his knees or legs and limps or drags a leg. I don't think it's bad, obviously, because he's gotten across that bridge okay, but it's possible he's had a knee replacement recently. Okay, I think he is delusional and I believe that he believes in God and thinks that perhaps God wanted him to do this. Neptune conjunct the MC here shows me this, shows me how delusional this guy is. It's on the side of the 9th house, which represents religion. Okay, and the Sun here is in the 9th house as well, which represents religion. So to me, this guy sees this as a religious type of experience. It reminds me a lot of Larry Jean Bell, the murderer of Shari Faye Smith and Deborah May Helmick. Thought that he was meant to kill the girls in order to be at one with their souls, etc., etc. Load of bullshit if you ask me, but that's their excuse. So, yep, there's religion here. Okay, so we have an older male, or at least over 30, somebody that has had a recent knee replacement or something with his leg. He is a gun owner. I would almost guarantee that he has guns. This up in Aries up here shows us that he probably carries guns and everything out in the open as well. So if he's able to, I don't know about gun laws in Delphi, but if you're allowed to carry guns in the open, he probably does. And if he doesn't, that also indicates that if you can't have guns walking around the street, then that shows me that there's somebody in authority that may be responsible for this. And something else that points in that direction to me is Saturn being the ruler of the 7th house. Saturn rules the police. So is this guy a policeman? It's highly likely and possible. And if he's not a policeman, it's very highly likely that he pretended to be one in order to get the trust of the girls. The chart appears like perhaps the girls went to meet this person or whoever killed them. Actually went there in order to meet them, but I actually can't see it personally. I can see that the girls just went off to do what they wanted to do, take photos, and not meet somebody, because it's it's an older man in this area. So unless they thought they were meeting with a younger man, but then I just can't see that either because there's no trace of it on social media, and there would be because we're basing this whole thing off of a Snapchat picture. You know, so it couldn't get any more relevant to social media than it is. And that, by the way, is shown here in the with Mercury and the part of fortune in the 8th house of death, communication. You know, it shows us that they communicated right up to the very, very last minute that they possibly could. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for the Snapchat chart and the girls' charts. Obviously, there is a lot more, but I don't want to go into too much detail with what I think happened and stuff like that. I don't think it's important. It was violent, we know that, and it was sad and uncalled for and a disgrace, and no excuse that this person can give is going to be a good enough excuse. So, you know, we can try and look at the charts and look at maps and everything and hope to understand things. Whether we can actually understand it, I don't think so. But if this can do anything and can show us where the possible person of interest is, then I'm going to keep doing it, that's for sure. So thank you for watching, and I really, really hope that we get this guy, that, you know, he needs to be got. He needs to be caught. And one last thing that I am going to do is show a picture of this guy. I have a whole bunch of pictures here. Okay. So this is the man responsible. He was also taken a photo of by Libby, or video recording, we're not quite sure. Video, I think, and this was a still taken from that. This is the man that they're looking for. So if you see him, please, please, if you know him, call the cops, call the tip line. There's email addresses, and I'll put something down in the comments. No, not the comments, the information as well, so you can see. Where to put your tips. There we are. There we have Libby, the suspect, and Abby. So if you see this guy, try and get a better picture of him again. Now we've got tiny pictures coming up, that's about right. So if you see this man, or you know this man, or you think you know this man, and it goes alongside some of the things perhaps that I've said, then please call Delphi Police and see my instructions down below for how to do that. Okay, thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.